Welcome to another episode of Two Drink Maximum. I'm your co-host Shane.
I'm your other co-host Chase.
We are excited today. We have a very cool guest with us.
Good
we
day.
are joined by J Cobe, who we are going to describe as a man for all seasons.
That is right.
That's
There is
a
no one
lovely-
label we can lock in for you.
Yeah, don't put me in a box.
No.
Jay, thank you so much for coming. We're
Thank you
excited to
for
have
joining
you.
us.
Thanks for having me. It's fantastic to be here, and I'm looking at your micro. Does that cage serve any function?
It holds the microphone so that if you
centered.
bump it, it doesn't hit any
I
metal
see.
and like potentially jiggle the
I
signal.
feel like it's sacred geometry. Or
Yeah,
something.
yeah,
It's really
yeah.
something.
It's really
to
just a
look at.
power move on our side.
Yeah,
But if
So
you-
it looks like there's a lot going on this side of the table.
If you twist it the right way, though, it's like Doctor Strange. You can undo a spell.
Oh,
and,
nice. Very
all
good.
collapses.
Yeah. So as we like to start the show, we are enjoying some drinks this evening.
Yes,
What are we
cheers.
drinking, Jay? And why are we drinking it?
Well, 2 out of 3 of us are drinking a very dirty martini.
Had to
with
call me
extra
out.
olives. Well,
Couldn't just let it go for the radio.
I thought maybe you would appreciate being somebody who is A, different, and B, cleaner.
Ah.
Yeah,
We're-
smoother,
we're-
cleaner.
We are dirty martinis here.
Yes, we have dirty martinis, and I
the-
saved myself the olives because I will vomit. So I don't want to do
Really,
that.
olives?
Yeah.
Oh, man.
It's bad. So why do we have our dirty and my non-dirty martinis in front of us today?
Well, it comes from one of my favorite quotes in a movie, The Parallax View.
Great film.
Fantastic film. They don't end them like that anymore.
No, they don't, man. That's a bleak movie.
And it's a scene where Warren Beatty, when he's young and beautiful, is wearing a turtleneck, and he walks into a redneck bar in the Pacific Northwest on his quest to solve this mystery.
Yeah.
And the waitress comes out, well, you're not from around here, are you? And he's like, no, what gave it away? Was it the wedge haircut or the beauty or what? And everybody's got a beer. It's like, I'm a lumberjack and I'm okay in there. And she says, well, what would you like? He says, I don't know. Do you know what I would like? And she says, well, I think you'd probably like a martini because a martini's like a woman's breast. He's like, how's that? She says, well, 1 is too few and 3 are too many. And to be honest, if I were to have 3 of these, it would be too many.
Oh, yeah.
My old boss said I had alcohol onset Tourette's.
Oh, no.
And I would say terrible things to married women.
Oh, no.
So 2 drink maximum seems like it fit right in there.
We're only going to allow you 2. it
That's
sounds
right. Exactly.
No thirds.
No thirds.
Well, these
So-
look delicious. Let's
yeah.
jump in. Cheers.
Cheers.
over here. Cheers. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you very much, gentlemen. It's been a while.
Ah, gin.
That is appropriately dirty. I love it, though. But
yeah.
like I said, I love the brininess that comes
Yeah.
from olive juice. And
I should have brought toothpicks or something. If I make a noise when my finger goes in my glass, you'll understand why.
You get olives stuck on your fingers.
Yeah.
while you're doing it.
all good.
Yeah. So, and then the only way this could have been any better is if that waitress served them.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
But
We're not up to waitress status yet. Someday we'll have some waitresses
Yeah,
bring.
maybe we'll have a cocktail waitress on the show. That'd be
Or
great.
waiters. Let's not be sexist.
Yeah,
well, I mean, isn't that half of this town?
yeah, true. So are you originally from Southern California or are you from
Northern.
Northern
Well-
California? Okay.
People say, where are you from? And I go, how far back do you want to go? Because I was actually born in Naples, Italy, while my dad was in the Navy.
Oh, very cool.
And though we
Okay.
moved a lot, I was not a Navy brat. My dad left when his time was up in Naples, and he came back to where he grew up, which was the Bay Area.
Gotcha.
And so I grew up in San Carlos, and
San Carlos.
it's a understandably not known place. It's on the peninsula, as they say, which would be, the bottom part of the sea of the bay.
Okay.
His parents were in Atherton. That's where I remember most of my childhood was in Atherton. And then he went off to graduate school to get his MBA from Wharton. And when he came back with a new wife. And we all moved down to Encino. And that was the first time I had been in the Los Angeles area. But didn't really know anything about the film business. In fact, I had just seen American Graffiti.
Okay.
Nice.
and Wolfman Jack was in that. And I thought he was a character. I
Oh,
didn't
no.
know he was real. And when I came down here, I got my first like clock radio, and Wolfman Jack was live on the radio, and I could hear that voice. And I loved oldies music. So like, I think until I was 10, the only thing I knew was like from 1950 to 1960 doo-wop.
Yeah, that style of music.
All that stuff. And so, so Northern California, very briefly, Southern California, then Boston, Philadelphia, college in New Jersey, some time in New York. My legal address since 2009 has been Crested Butte, Colorado.
Hey.
But I moved out here to be in the business in 2001,
Okay.
February of 2001, and sort of left after the writer's strike of 2008 and 9. The whole industry was sort of collapsing. Like if you didn't have anything going on, you were dead weight. And it started with writers, but it ended up being everybody, right? Like, if you were an agent and your writers were dead weight, then you were dead weight.
Yeah,
Out you went.
Industry-wide contraction at that point.
Contraction is the word, and there was a lot of merging and acquisitioning going on, and
Still happening, apparently.
right. Well, and to be fair, I mean, at that point in time, DVDs were just starting to sort of change the business model,
Right.
and we discovered pretty quickly, I think it was 2005 or 6, where they discovered that the saturation was about 100 DVDs, and then nobody went any further. You swap them out for Blu-rays, and then some people get into the original computer disc, the giant ones.
The Laserdisc.
The Laserdisc, thank you. And those are super collectible, and some people still swear by those. And, you know, this is a town of many mediums. They love the image. I always liked that people made it simple for me. It's not it's a movie or a picture, or it's an image.
It's an image, yeah.
And there's so many mediums. And, you know, my buddy Tim, we've talked a little bit briefly about the reason I keep coming back to town. I was like, I just don't understand why there's so many billboards in this town.
Yeah.
Like, it's the most self-advertised town
It
ever.
is.
Like, I don't know many places that are as well informed about the media landscape.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's from billboards. And he says, "Oh, well, that's because they want you to know they care." And I said, "Excuse me?" He says, "I'm from marketing and advertising. The billboard isn't for you. The billboard is for the person in the picture."
Right. Yeah.
So that they know-
I've heard that before, yeah.
So that they know that you're putting out for them.
Yeah.
That you're doing your due diligence. And I was like, oh, suddenly it all makes more sense, right? Like, there's my advertising dollar.
Yeah.
Where I was going with that is the whole mechanism has changed, right? The pandemic pushed Netflix kicked Blockbuster's ass on the DVD.
Yep.
That was the first change. And then they turned it over to streaming way ahead of the curve. And then everybody during the pandemic wanted to imitate them, and all the numbers skewed. And now they're all getting burned.
Yep.
And film is coming back slowly, but it's coming back. And the business model is screwed, right? Nobody knows. The DVD sale through part of the business model is over.
Right.
The streaming, you can't get the numbers, right? They'll tell you what the rank is, but they won't, or they'll give you the minutes
Yeah.
or the eyeballs
What
or
does that
whatever.
even
How are you
mean,
supposed to
right?
quantify
Yeah.
They're
it?
still trying to figure it out, right? Like I just found out that
That is sort of insane that they've been able to get away with that like black box mechanism of people bring them projects and they're like, well, how'd it do? And they're like, it did okay. We'll prove
Right.
it. No.
I was in the top 10 for 4 weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. What does
What's
that mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember when DVD sales were going on, I was trying to get the numbers for that. And I was very interested in trying to figure out if there was a relationship between DVD sales and dollars spent in marketing. That was a number I was interested in.
If it actually translated.
If it translated, if it was, because, you know, people were saying, opening weekend is just basically a marketing thing for the DVD sale through. And a really good movie was a 1-to-1 from box office to DVDs. That was considered a. And then you were like, well, so how can I get the numbers? Well, unless you're a part of the studio or whatever, you can't.
Yeah.
The best they would give you was a ranking. And so you're like, oh, we were ranked number 2. What does that mean? Like, what's the gap between 1 and 2?
Yeah.
What is the, like,
It could be 5 million, right? And number 2 could be you sold 100 units this week or whatever, right?
Correct.
You just never know.
Yeah. And rentals versus anyway. So the mechanism is all screwed up.
Yeah.
And, you know, when I first got into the business, it was 1998. And Sony had put out their 900 prosumer digital zero lux camera.
Yep,
Yeah.
I know it well.
Those are what
And
we started with.
That's what, you know, it changed. They were talking about the democratization of film.
Yeah.
And
Digital revolution.
you had Lars von Trier and all the guys doing the now I've forgotten what they were called. The 10, they were going to attack the ponderous mechanism of movie making. And
yeah, they had those movies that had all these very strict, specific requirements of like it has to have this dialogue. And
you couldn't use music on top of it. It had to be played in the scene. You had to wear your own clothes. There were no explosions. There were no giant set pieces. It was, the movie that triggered it for us was Celebration. Lars von Trier's Celebration was like everybody came together for a weekend and they basically filmed it at this location. It's so close to my mouth. Anyway, so that's when I first got into the business, and we shot a film. 28 actors, 28 days, 28 locations, $28,000. Because if you went over, we were on a SAG experimental budget. If you went over 75, you had to pay everybody their
minimums
scale.
go up,
Yeah.
And, I guess the coup for us was we had a young Paul Rudd.
Oh, nice.
Nice.
As a guy who
Still is young Paul Rudd. You
Yeah,
never know.
right, that guy
if he was,
doesn't
yeah,
age.
you never know if he was old.
He's just going to wake up and be 90.
Yeah. Literally one of the funniest guys I've ever met in my life. Just a naturally funny guy. That movie has never seen the light of day. It turned into a vanity project or whatever. But it was fascinating to use the 900 in zero lux. Like, we're shooting with candles in a bar, and that's when I found out how important sound was. He says as
I turn the knobs.
Yeah.
And I was almost there again. I'm sorry. That word is going to dogma. The dogma.
Dogma
yes.
95.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, that's it. Dogma. And one of the rules was, as a director, you weren't going to put your name on the film. That was the first rule that went out the window, right? All those guys.
Of course.
Put their
I'm not
names on
doing
the
it. If
films.
I'm going through the work of directing something, it's going to have my name slapped on it. Yeah.
But that was a radical. I remember working with this guy, and he came back and he said, "We're gonna make a movie." I was like, "Oh, okay, great." I had been his. I was his assistant. I had talked my way in. I basically said, "Look, I'm a construction guy in New York. I've worked with high-end clients. It's basically the same thing, right? Like there's a script, we have a blueprint, there's a budget, there's a schedule, blah blah blah. You've got subs, I've got subs.
I can do this.
It's basically the same thing."
That analogy is a very good analogy. I also have a construction family, so
and
it makes sense.
It makes a lot of sense, right? And so he hesitated. Didn't want to work with a friend. That got resolved when he got tapped to write something for Icon, Mel Gibson's company. And then while we were doing all that, and I was trying to turn him into a going concern, I didn't know about loan out corporations. And I basically was like, "Look, we're just going to turn you into a corporation. That's going to give everybody the sense that you're going to be around longer." And so I was in the process of making a bigger production company for him. And he came back after seeing Lars von Trier and Celebration and knowing about this camera. He's like, "We're going to make a movie." And so we did that. And there was I know I have a copy of it somewhere. I should probably dig it up. And
What was your biggest takeaway from that process?
you can do a lot when you don't know what's possible, right? Like I didn't know that what we were trying was impossible. The limited budget, the ridiculous schedule, I was also basically the line producer because I was doing the schedule. We had an actress that was coming from Ireland that had like X number of days, and we had to fit in everything around her. And so it was from a production standpoint, it was a sort of a trial by fire.
Yeah.
I got very little sleep. We started with night shoots. Everything was a borrowed location. He was a big drinker, and so he basically, very wisely, I thought, whenever there was a new bar that opened in town, he would show up the day it opened. He would read about it, and he would sit there and he'd be like, "Is it okay if I write here?" And he would write there for like the first week, and he would meet the entire staff, and then he would come back at night with his buddies, and sometimes that was like up to 12 people. And then he turned that into his locations.
Yeah.
Right? They're like,
He
look,
was playing the long game.
oh,
here.
he very smart in that way. And so, yeah, the bar would close at 4. We would show up at 5. We would shoot whatever we could, black out the windows or whatever. And, you know, that's when we found out that sound was bright and bouncing off floors and you know, all this other stuff.
Yeah.
And that our DP, who had never DP'd before, was a photographer, didn't understand blocking. We didn't have any storyboards. It was all in the director's head. So I learned an enormous amount from that.
That's an exciting way to go about the filmmaking process.
So this meeting right before we start production, I've got like an Emmy award-winning costume designer, and you know the everybody, and I go, all right, well that's the pinnacle of my knowledge. Like 5 minutes of discussing. That's me. That's it. I'm just gonna hold on to the tail of this tiger, and you guys go and do your thing. You know,
Let me know what you need.
Yeah, basically.
Well, I want to back up a second too, because before you got into Hollywood, you were doing construction stuff in New York. Was that kind of the start of your professional career, or was that kind of another transition for you as well?
You know, I didn't know it at the time, but I was bred to be a generalist, like you call me, a very flattering man for all. See, I always wanted to be a Renaissance man. I really did. I think Christopher Wren was my guy when I was younger, mostly because I already knew I wasn't Da Vinci, right? Like, I'm not that good.
Yeah.
But Christopher Wren, like the guy put a chain around a dome, I might be able to come up with something like that, you know. Plus, he had a cool name, and he was British, and, you know, I was like, yeah. So I was always interested. I am still interested in how everything works.
Yeah.
Like, and that's, I think, you know, I literally made the argument that I said to you about construction to get into film. I got into construction because I wanted to know how to build my own house, right? That was like when I was in college, I was a philosophy major, and I knew I didn't want to be on the educational treadmill I thought I was going to go back and be a professor, but I wanted to have some real world experience, because I would watch professors talk to people, and there were just people they could never reach because they didn't know how to talk about the real world or whatever.
Their whole lives
right?
were academia, right?
Yeah, they were in the ivory tower, and so I wasn't interested in that. I wanted to be able to understand that and to do that. And so as soon as I graduated from school, my dad thought I was going to take the money he gave me and go backpacking in Europe, and I bought a car and I went to work in a construction site. And he's like, "What?" And I was like,
Oh.
"I want to learn how to build a house." So yeah, and eventually you get to a point where you kind of do enough of everything, where now you want to either do it at a higher level or you want to get more specialized. And so I was a stone caster for a while, a mold maker. I wish I could say that these were plans. They were all sort of very laissez-faire, right? What I really was an ultimate Frisbee player. and
I played disc golf, and therefore.
There you go. And that had a big explosion over the pandemic.
Oh, yes.
That guy's shot, just put it on the board. Anyway, and you can make money at that. Like, the professional Ultimate League is relatively new for those of us who played before. That was always our dream. In fact, at one point in time, there were 2 leagues. But you could make money playing disc golf.
I'm not that good.
A lot. Well, one could make money playing.
I
Someone
think he meant
who
you
is
in the
not me.
proverbial
Yes.
sense. Yeah, I don't think he actually meant. I've seen you play. I don't think he meant you.
It's mostly like my
Yeah.
personal therapy. I go outside, I throw a thing, I get frustrated. I work through
Right.
that frustration in a healthy way.
Yeah.
And I finish the game and
That's
I feel
right.
good about this.
Yeah, you got a
how it
target,
go.
you
Yeah.
walk. It's like,
Sometimes I make one good shot in 50
I got
and I'm
news
like,
for you,
yes.
fellas. Regular golf works the same,
Same
way.
way.
When you play
That's
golf,
right.
all you do is you just get angry at how bad
Yeah.
you suck at this game.
Sure.
Yeah.
You're really just learning
And
to
it's-
deal with stress.
And that's pretty much almost every game. Like I was fascinated when I found out that bowling and darts were basically the same game, right? So
yeah.
I didn't understand bowling until one of my many jobs. I worked at a gas station. I was a tow truck driver
Nice.
and managed. So I managed a gas station that had like a retail store, 2 mechanics, 3 bays, a used car lot, a wrecker and a flatbed, AAA towing. And so and we were the #1 oil salesman in New Jersey, which is not nothing. 'Cause one of the things that was on my bucket list as a kid was I wanted to be in a bowling league. And I don't know why. I just
The shirts,
wanted to.
because it's the shirts.
You
That's why.
could've-
They're
Well,
so cool.
the shirts, and also at one point in time, it was the largest sport in America.
Really?
There were more people that could bowl because it doesn't. I mean,
guess
look at the beer belly
opportunity
you
cost,
can have.
Yeah, the opportunity cost is low. The
Yeah, and you can
athleticism is, can you hold a ball?
Well, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
And so now I'm in this bowling league, and the first thing that my captain tells me is I bowl wrong.
Oh, no.
And I'm like, what are you talking about? And he's like, your spin is opposite. So just like me playing pool, I taught myself how to play pool. I hold the stick wrong. I don't hold it the way you're supposed to. It's all very awkward. And
Really?
there's no, the backwards. And so you're never going to get that nice straight follow through the way I hold the stick. Same thing with the bowling. When you have the opposite spin because your release is wrong, right? I'm releasing underneath instead of over. What you do is you go from gutter to gutter and back.
Yeah.
So you triple your chance of screwing up.
Yeah.
He's like, no. Bowling is always the same. The reason that you have those triangles on the bowling is so you can set up your feet where to determine your release is always supposed to be the same spot.
Yeah.
Did you ever find a league to join after
I
that?
was in a league when I found out I was doing it wrong, and my
stay?
average went up from 180 to 210.
Nice.
wow.
So that's not insignificant in a bowling league. So yeah, master of none. Yeah, jack of all trades, master of none.
Which is probably not how you want to sell yourself as when you work in construction.
Well, I mean, one of the things I always advanced to supervision pretty quickly because I didn't know how to do it right personally, but I knew when somebody was doing it wrong. And if you can identify that in a timely manner, you're going to save somebody some money.
Yeah.
And they immediately go, you suck at doing it, but you're really good at telling other people how to do it. Why don't you come over here? So I was, that happened on my very first job in New Jersey, in Edison, New Jersey. We're building these giant apartment complexes, and they're just hideous. It's just terrible brickwork and terrible vinyl siding. And, and I watching some guy try to tamp down the sand in the foundation before they pour the concrete. And I'm just seeing this wave go in front of the roller, and I'm like, that is not sand. That is clay.
Yeah.
So I go to tell my boss, and he's like, you just saved us so much money. You are now the head of labor.
You
And I
know
was
what
like,
clay looks like. You're
you know,
hired.
it's the other end of the job site. He's like, oh my goodness. So yeah, so that was sort of the story. Was I could sit there and go, you're not doing that right. And I've definitely had people advance on me with a handsaw.
Oh, man.
Oh, God.
You did your floor wrong. You got to rip it out. You got to start over. And he comes at me with the handsaw, and I just back up until he unplugs it from the wall. and then I say,
You're
and
safe.
you're fired.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But,
The minute they invented battery handsaws, that's when
yes,
you're
that
like, I
was-
got to get out
oh, I
of
gotta-
construction.
yeah. Well, and that was kind of what drove me into entertainment was it became really, really clear that if I wanted to do better, I was going to have to go back to school for construction management or architecture or an MBA or start my own company. And so I started my own company. And when I went down there and gave them my fingerprints and took my contractor's test in New York City, it's all very, because you're liable.
Very efficient.
Yeah. The guy looks at me and he goes, 85% of businesses fail in the first 3 years. And I'm like, yeah.
Thanks for the tip.
I'm going to be the 15%.
Yeah.
And I was not. I lasted about 11 months. And then I ended up starting as a construction consultant on the cigar lounge in Midtown. And then I became like the manager because I was like, you can't serve that liquor with those cigars. And he's like, what do you know about Scotch? And I was like, well, more than you do, dude. Look at that. Look at your choices.
Became a tastemaker early on.
Yeah.
One of the lessons I'm picking up just hanging out with you is if you start telling people that they're doing things wrong,
You can get a
They'll
job.
give you a better job. I don't know.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I hadn't thought of that. I should do that more.
Is that how your family got into the construction business?
Oh,
too?
absolutely
It's just
not.
that's wrong.
It's like once a family becomes a cop family,
Yeah.
everybody starts to become a cop. Once a family becomes a construction family, everybody goes into construction in some form or another.
Yeah. It's
So
a
when I-
gravity field.
Yeah.
When I said I wanted to be a professor, I wanted to be I was interested in philosophy of science. I wanted to be a philosophy of physics guy and whatever, but I'm still very into science. And when I got into, one of the reasons I loved getting into film was it's literally a place where whatever your interest is, you could exercise it in
yes.
film.
Yeah.
If you're a scientist and you like optics, you can be on the camera. If you like business, there's business. You want to be creative. You want to do costumes. You want to whatever.
Yeah.
There's a place for you.
Marketing, manufacturing,
Yeah.
art,
All of it,
literature.
right? It's
like
fantastic.
It's all inside that little bubble.
And there is no formula, right? It's never the same
Yeah,
twice.
not really, no.
It's a very all the wisdom comes from stories, right? Like everybody sits there and they tell you their horror stories or the success stories, and you glean what you can from it and you try and apply it to whatever you're doing, but it's never the same twice. And
Yeah. It's overwhelmingly the only art form that you simply cannot do by yourself, right?
Yes.
Painting, you can do by yourself. Writing a book, right? Making a song, you can do all of those things solo. But I mean, and not to say that no one has ever made a movie by themselves, but the good ones are usually made with an army of people that.
Well, and you say army, and Lars von Trier, like the reason that Dogma was so exciting that they're going to eliminate that ponderous mechanism of movie making, because it's like a military thing. Like I was involved through one of my endeavors with a film that was shooting in Belgium, and it was going to be a World War II film, and there was a helicopter shot, and this is before Bluetooth and cell phones and whatever. And so for you to do the helicopter shot, everybody sits down and has a meeting, and then they literally synchronize their watches, and you get 3 passes. Each pass has to be this long. Then the light changes. And then you part ways.
Yeah. You
And
trust that they're going to do it.
And they're going to do it, and you're going to do it, and they're miles away, and you're sitting next to the camera, and here comes the helicopter, and you're like, okay, so in the course of, and this is true in construction too, in the course of 100 years, there's a reason why people do it this way, right? Like we have box houses in the United States. If you go down to New Mexico, they're all adobe. There aren't any straight lines. It's a totally different mechanism for building. If you go to Morocco, it's all curves. There's no line, right? So, but the 16 inches on center and all that, that's all for ease of manufacture. The 4x8 sheet, bop, bop, bop. It's all, and that's the same thing with film. There's a reason why there's a lens puller and there's a guy who like. All of this makes sense when it costs $7 a second to develop the film.
Yeah.
Never mind
all these positions on a film set were not deemed by God in the beginning.
Right.
They were all hard fought of like, it'd be good if we had a guy to pull focus on the lens.
And so then digital comes along And what happens is everybody goes, oh, we're going to save so much money on the media.
Yeah.
So what did we do on that film that never made it the light of day? We shot the hell out of it. It was $10 for an hour.
Right? And those little
So what
tapes.
did we end up with? 200 hours of film.
Yeah, exactly.
And our editor is like, fuck you.
Yeah.
yeah, just kill me.
Fuck.
Just turn it on and walk away. What the hell's going on, guys?
Yeah.
What now? I never mind actually editing this for he's like, you guys got to do selects. He like pushes it back on us or whatever, right? And even then, it's 50 hours of film.
Yep. And now where we're currently at in the industry is we're now also facing this hard issue with archiving stuff, right? Because say what you want about film and how expensive it is still single-handedly one of the best image preservation mediums, where if you keep film at sub-zero or just below sub-zero or 32 degrees, right, and you keep it in dry and cold, we know that film can last for 100 years, right, in perfect condition. Digital stuff now, the way that hard drives and technology keeps changing, you're always running the risk of a hard drive crashing and failing or something like that. And so all of these dailies and the original camera negative, quote unquote, that you had on a hard drive, if that hard drive crashes, boom, it's gone, From a science
Standpoint, prior to construction, I was working at the science and technology division of the phone company, right when digital was coming.
The phone, which phone company can you say?
It was 9X at the time.
Okay.
It's now Verizon.
Yeah.
So 9X was the New York New England exchange after the Bell broke up.
Yeah.
Each one, and that was the largest exchange because it had the most people.
Yeah.
And they had a science and technology building. So Bell Labs became Lucent, and there's the telephony family is small, like the film family. Like eventually everybody knows everybody else. But I happened to be working in the science and technology division of 9X when the Shoemaker-Levy 9 comet hit Jupiter, which was like right after the development of the World Wide Web. So everybody had these super high-end Spark stations, Sun System Spark stations, and we're watching what now would basically be a snapshot every 30 seconds of these comets going into, and we're watching it live, and everybody's gathered around this monitor, and we're like, oh my God.
I remember that on the news and stuff.
And the book that had just come out was Negroponte's Being Digital. And basically, and I just reread this because it was the 20th anniversary or something, 30th anniversary, 25th anniversary. Anyway, basically what he was saying was, there's actual things and then there's electronic things. There's the real world and then there's the digital world. And the problem with the digital world, or the benefits that cut both ways is easy to duplicate, hard to secure.
Yes.
Right? And so I came out of that, and when the prosumer camera came out, I was like, someday we're going to just press a button and we're going to distribute. And my buddy was like, no way. And I was like, yeah, way. And this is where we're at. And this is this is why the business model sucks, right?
Yeah.
Because in that 100 years, the one thing that the studios excelled at was monopolizing distribution.
Yes.
And
now we all have it in the palm of our hand.
Yeah, they can't freaking do it anymore.
Yeah.
And they're notoriously slow in dealing with technology and adjusting and everything else. And it really caught them by surprise, even though everybody was telling it. And I remember watching an interview with Francis Ford Coppola, and I really want to see his film, even though it's getting terribly reviewed. But that guy is so always ahead of his time.
He appears to be very, very ahead of his time currently.
Have you seen it?
I did. I enjoyed it. You know what I mean? It's
a giant metaphor, right?
It takes some big swings, and I think some of those swings miss, but I think some of them connect. And I think that it's like I will always take a filmmaker making big choices and taking big swings over kind of middle of the road. So is it a good film? I don't know. That's not really for me to say. But I kind of watched it with my jaw dropped the whole time watching, just like I can't believe it.
Would you want to see it again?
In a heartbeat.
Yeah.
In a heartbeat.
Okay.
Yeah,
So that's good.
And that's what I'm looking forward to. And he got me with casting, right? Like You know,
Right.
also the fact that he was like, I don't want any studio to touch it. I'm going to put all my. God bless that
Fair,
guy
yeah.
for all of it.
He
Like,
gets to do whatever he wants. And he paid
and
for it.
and
Does art always have to be entertaining?
no,
Ah.
but entertainment has a different. I mean, it's got a sort of a different goal,
Yeah.
right? And sometimes art can be entertaining, and sometimes entertainment can be art, but they are not the same.
Entertainment, more often than not, is escapism.
Well, yeah, and I also think in many ways it's failed art, right? Like, so in my mind, art is sublimation. You take something negative and you turn it into something positive, right? Like whether it's my personal experience
Sure.
and I've been damaged and I'm going to turn that into, or whatever.
I would break it down even further, and you take something and turn it into something else. It doesn't
Well, sure.
positive and negatives.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, but-
That goes up for debate pretty quickly. So.
Well, yeah, as a philosopher, we definitely like to go for the good and the beautiful
yes,
and the
yes.
true and the this and the that and the other. But there's ugly truths and there's beautiful lies.
Correct.
And there's all that thing. But entertainment, like when I used to manage writers and directors, I would say, look, you have to decide if you've written this script. You have to decide, is this something that you want to make or you want to sell? Because it's a totally different approach. Like,
Absolutely.
sell is entertainment,
Yeah.
and make is you know it's how much control do you have, and what is it that you're trying to say, and if you are not trying to say anything really profound, then maybe we should sell, and if this is like your baby, then 20 years from
Those
now,
are different decisions
Yeah.
you need to make.
maybe you'll get to make it.
Right.
And so I used to talk about Madonna, right? The lowest sort of common denominator. Millions of people enjoy her stuff, but it's kind of pablum, right? It's kind of like, yeah.
Don't tell Madonna that.
I did. No. One of the construction jobs I had in New York was on her apartment.
Oh, no.
And her brother just passed, Chris Ciccone, rest in peace, and he was heavily involved in that design of that apartment. One of my favorite stories is he asked to make a cherry bar in one of her rooms,
A cherry bar?
out of cherry wood.
cherries?
Out of cherry
Oh,
wood.
oh.
Just a bar of a variety
we
of
both went the
cherries.
same way. Of, yeah.
No, cherry, like cherry wood
yeah.
bar.
Okay.
A bar out
I
of
get a
cherry
pass
wood.
for that. You don't, since you were involved in construction. You like shame on you
No,
for
he's,
not.
he's thinking it looks really good. It's cherry, man. It's a good bar.
I just-
maraschinos.
Yeah,
I got
a variety
the
of
works, man.
jars full of
Yeah.
cherries.
Yeah.
That sounds like a Madonna's brother thing.
Sure. Well, he's a guy who didn't have any experience, right?
Ah.
So she's hired one of the great architects of the time in New York City, and Chris is drawing on napkins and handing it to these architects who are turning it into real drawings, and then
Make
we
it look
take
like
those
it.
drawings and we build the thing and we install it, and he comes in and he goes, "What is this?" And we're like, "It's your cherry bar." And he's like, "No, I said cherry." And he reaches into his bag and he pulls out the sample of wood and he puts it on the table, and we all know what it is, and we flip it over, and on the back it says mahogany. And he's like, "That's what I want." And we're all like, "Job security. Let's
Great.
go."
Yeah, fine. We'll do it again, right?
do
She
it
can
again.
afford this.
Start
yeah.
over.
Start over. So I didn't really. That was right around the time of her sex book.
Yeah.
And one day I'm working in that apartment, and I'm like, "Oh my God, this is the window where she's flashing like."
That's the mirror.
Yeah.
That's the
Hey.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. She bought the floor above her so she could see over the trees of Central Park.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah. So cherry bar, Chris Ciccone.
Yeah.
May he rest in peace.
Cheers to that. And since we learned a new word, I'm going to use it in a sense. Speaking of usufruct,
Oh yeah, there you go.
we need to pour ourselves another drink. We need to share some. We need to pool our
will.
resources together in the community.
right.
'Cause
Usufruct.
We got some empty glasses, so we're going to take a quick break, and we will be right back with J Cobe.
Be right back.
Chase, I don't know about you, but it does feel like ever since COVID hit, we spend so much time in our homes, and our homes have kind of become our office, and it's been this kind of weird blend of professional and home. I find that occasionally it is difficult to become creative in the house. Sometimes you got to get out and you got to find a different space to kind of let that creativity fly. And we are excited to share with our listeners that if you are in the LA area, we have the solution for you. We are proudly sponsored by The Muse Rooms, which is a creative co-working space that is here. They have a Hollywood location and they have a
place.
Burbank location, two convenient locations for you, that is ready to serve all of your creative space needs. If you want to rent space for a day to work on that screenplay, or if you need to rent a conference room for a big meeting that you have with a team that doesn't meet regularly, the Muse Rooms has got you covered. It's a great space. It's a great owner. It's a great vibe too. It's just a really cool. You'll get points with the youngsters.
Oh, yeah.
For being cool for renting out.
It's
this
the hip
space.
spot to be, indeed.
It definitely is. So give the Muse Rooms a check if you for all of your creative co-working space needs at the Muse MUSE Rooms.com. And we're back with J Cobe. We've got 2 of the dirtiest martinis you've ever seen, and then
one clean one.
One clean one, but that's all right.
And extra olives have even extra olives now.
That's exactly right.
We were 3, now we're 4.
The olives
taking
have
all of my
olives. Yeah.
olives, willingly
And
give them away to you.
And you found toothpicks. I'm
Yeah.
so excited.
There we go. Yeah.
I produced toothpicks.
Yeah, right, exactly. You're like the
excellent
Joel
producer.
Silver of toothpicks. Yeah. So I mean, just talking to you, it's fascinating to hear so many different careers, right? Or just industries, from construction to Hollywood. I mean, even working in the gas station. It seems to me that a particular industry isn't really your focus. It seems like there's got to be some sort of guiding principle or kind of a code of conduct that you're seeking in a job or kind of fulfillment. Is there kind of a guiding, principle that gets you from A to B there?
What a lovely question. I like I said earlier, I wish there was more planning involved. Right.
Sure.
I'm a very intellectually laissez-faire kind of guy.
Yeah.
Right.
So you're not Hannibal from the A-Team.
Yeah. Well, no, I do love when a plan comes together, but it's never my plan.
Okay.
Right. Like I think I was talking earlier about extemporaneous speaking. And one of the things that you do is you do things on the fly. And I used to, when I was younger, I was very conscious of the fact that I had like a pocket full of dreams and there were tools that were necessary to accomplish those dreams. And if I didn't have the tools, then my goal was to acquire them. And it was better to have somebody pay you to acquire them than it was to pay to acquire them.
Always.
So you can always go to school to acquire a tool, but if you can fake it till you make it enough so somebody's going to pay you while you acquire this thing that you need.
Pay you to learn is the way to do it.
So when I was working at the phone company, I only did that because it was geographically close to a university where I could go back and study calculus and physics because I wanted to be a philosophy of physics guy. That's what I wanted to do. And so this was this job in this closest thing to a think tank. I tried to start a think tank when I got out of college and
Nice.
beginning of digital, and everybody's like,
does one start a think tank?
well, it
Buy a
turns
tank.
You buy a tank?
and then think about it. Oh, it turns out that it's
I
all about.
myself have found Panzers have been the best.
Oh no, Sherman!
There you go.
Come on,
I mean,
be
I was
American.
I was going septic, so you both are better.
Septic,
There you
very
go.
construction.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. Tank Girl, where are you now?
Hey, great movie.
I would look at it. I didn't codify this until later, but as a guy who has, in fact, changed his career several times, the first time I did it was by accident, and then after that, I started to look at it. And from philosophy, I would go back to first principles. I would basically say, what is it that I'm trying to achieve? When I got into film, I knew that there was a ceiling that I could do in construction. Without an advanced degree or something else, and that I was never going to make more than $100K in construction unless I went back and got my architecture degree or whatever. And so I was like, what I want is something with no top. And
Topless,
in
other words.
I hadn't thought of it in all these
It's
years.
not about what you say; it's about how you say it.
Exactly.
One sounds boring; the other one sounds fun.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I don't know if people
You didn't want endless opportunities. You wanted topless opportunities.
I did. I wanted topless opportunity. I don't know if people know this about you, Chase, but you have a gap in your teeth.
I do. I'm very aware of my gap in my teeth.
And I don't know if you are aware, but in the literary tradition,
Loose women.
gap-toothed woman is a loose woman.
Yes.
So
I'm aware.
Okay, so of course you are. In Crested Butte, there's a restaurant called Tio Cali that makes burritos, and if you have a gap in your teeth, you get a 20% discount.
Oh,
So
I got to get to Crested Butte.
Nice.
there you go.
I will always save money on burritos.
So I got far afield of where I was going, but so I was codifying this idea of first principles, like what is it that I want? And I didn't want a glass ceiling, and I looked at it and I was like stockbroking and medical sales and invention. I didn't have anything to invent, and then film was one of those. Like if you were successful in film, there's kind of no top.
There's no limit.
Like I didn't even know that there was a line that you could be above or below when I started looking into it. But above the line, no freaking top.
Good place to be.
No freaking top. And so I was like, okay, and here, and again, back to this idea that it could potentially, as a generalist or whatever, it could utilize everything I was interested in, everything that I wanted. And earlier, what I was going to say about construction families is, as a science guy, I'm reading this article about cellular switches on a DNA level.
Oh.
And, Gladwell, whom I'm not a huge fan of, but talked about the 10,000 hours to be an expert or whatever. It turns out that if you do something long enough, significantly long enough, you will actually change your genetic makeup. And so the idea of a construction family is not, in fact, unheard of, because because it's not just the environment you grow up in. Somebody may have switched some switches on their cellular level so that you look at things that way. And I'm fascinated. My own story, I was fascinated by, like, how did I end up in construction? My dad was a railroad guy. His dad was a insurance fire guy. Like, there was no. On my mother's side, it turns out everybody was in construction. I didn't know that because I'm kind of estranged from my mother's side of the family. But
You didn't know it until after you got into construction?
yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I grew up playing with Legos and fascinated by everything. And it was definitely not from my dad or my immediate family. But it turns out my mother's side of the family.
It's in your genes.
Construction. And it's in your genes. And if you get interested in something enough, you can change your genetic structure. This is a story I read in the 90s, and I was like, oh, we should do a film about this.
Yeah.
And that never happened. But anyway, as my buddy said, ideas are a dime a dozen. Just write the fucking movie.
Execution, always.
Yeah, always. So I decided that I was going to try and figure out how to become a more effective generalist, right? Like, I am interested in, and there aren't many things that do interest me. Right now, I'm very interested in AI.
All right.
Only
Everyone is.
Well, yes and no. I mean, many people are. It's definitely gonna. I mean, it was definitely a part of the last strike.
Yes.
Right. And if you're a D girl or a development person or whatever, strikes right at the heart of your being, right? Because that first step as a writer is the one that gets the most money, and that's the one that AI can do.
Correct.
Right. And so I understand the protections as a guy who's worked with writers. I get it, but I also understand that, I mean, look, I've played with ChatGPT, and it's like a sophomore level essay. Right. That's what it is.
It's the way I use it is the world's dumbest writing assistant.
Yeah.
I can just give it the most menial, useless task, and it'll generate me 5 pages of this thing. Like, I don't want to research every town that has a bowling alley in America.
Correct.
Give me a list, and then you have to go
if you want an assistant, a research assistant, ChatGPT is fantastic.
Right.
But yeah, well, it's 8 out of 10 times right, or whatever, right?
Just like a sophomore in college.
Yeah.
That you're giving a task.
So my first experience with ChatGPT is I asked it to tell me the top 10 books on AI, and 8 of them existed, and the last 2 it made up.
Yes,
Nice.
it's doing that. It's really fucking weird.
They call it the AI illusion or hallucination.
Yes.
That's what they call it, the hallucination.
The robot is hallucinating.
And I wouldn't have known to check, except for it very clearly used 2 previous authors' names as the author of the 8th book, like the first name of one and the last name of the other. And I was like, wait a minute.
That doesn't seem right.
So then I checked, and it was like, no, it doesn't exist.
The AI is learning to bullshit on its book reports, is what it's doing right now.
For sure. And, it's like, let's be... So as a philosophy major in college, AI in the 80s was all theoretical. They didn't have the technology to do anything.
Right.
It was all structural, thinking this, blah, 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 that, getting back to epistemology. How do we know what we know, and how do we learn things, and all this stuff.
Truth?
I mean, because logic is about truth trees and all this other stuff. It was definitely, there's this weird crossover between epistemology and computer science,
Yeah.
right? Like, and I remember in 1984 having a conversation with a piece of software where I pretty quickly got to a place where it was making nonsense, right? And so from a Turing test standpoint, you're like, whatever.
Immediately
Yeah,
forget.
it failed very quickly.
Very
right?
quickly.
Yeah.
Very quickly. You could get it to do that. Now it's a little harder. The one that I've used pretty effectively, which I borrowed from somebody else, is how many words is your next answer going to be?
Oh.
And it has a hard time
Breaks
answering
its
that.
brain. Yeah. It doesn't
Yeah,
know.
it doesn't know how to project its own response to the. Now, that's on 3.5. I don't know where 4.0, whatever. You know,
I think they're getting to 5
but
in ChatGPT pretty soon.
But the major reality is, from my standpoint, and you know, I'm coming at this from a guy who's spent some time in tech and some time in media and has a philosophy background and all this other stuff. The biggest issue that I have with AI is it's an averaging program.
yeah.
That's what it is. It's trying to predict the most likely.
Correct.
It's a propositional program about what the probabilities are of the next word,
right.
and it's only as smart as the people that use it.
Right.
And it doesn't have what we have naturally, which is this extrapolation concept, where you sit there and you go, I have this anchor point, and here's this other point that I'm interested in, and if I draw a line, and I
Which is
just keep go out.
It's just curiosity is what
Curiosity. That's
I call
another.
it. The machine isn't curious about anything. The machine wants to give you the response that it thinks is the most likely response.
Doesn't
you're
have
expecting.
any meaning.
Yeah.
Right. It can't. So I started thinking about, like, one of the first things. I don't know what you guys' education was like, because how old are you?
37.
37, and you're-
Yeah.
Also 37.
Also 37. So I'm 59.
Ah,
So that's a significant difference. That's a whole generation.
correct.
So when I was in 5th grade, we had this thing called SRIs, which was these reading cards. And you would pull out these reading cards and you would be able to, it was sort of like self-education or whatever. And it was sort of reading for comprehension. And it would ask you a bunch of questions. You would read a little short story or a blurb or something, and then it would ask you questions at the end, and then you would be evaluated on how well you understood
Sounds
what
like
you
they
were reading.
like soft teaching you speed reading,
Yeah, it was almost like
learning chunks.
what is the? Oh my God, words escape me. It must be the gin.
I think it's the olives.
Anyway, there is no reading for comprehension in AI, right?
No.
There is no knowledge, right? It is a purely evaluative thing. I read X number of sentences, and after this word is this next word.
Correct.
Now, there has been some interesting emergent things that have come from it. For instance, to quote Frank Zappa, which I love, is it comes down to the apostrophe, right? Right. So what happened is it discovered with don't and isn't and wasn't and weren't that there's a positive and a negative. So they said there's this emergent identification of sentiment,
Yes.
positive and negative. This is emergent.
Right.
All it did was it noticed that there were positive results and negative results, and the negative results happened after the apostrophe. You know, right? Like do not, don't.
Comparative choices.
Yeah. So it's not a position of meaning. It's literally just an evaluative thing, and it says this is the most likely thing. So and now we're talking about synthetic data. So now they've scraped fucking everything. They've scraped Reddit and
Data made from assumptions of data, which is really weird.
so somebody decided to unleash it on Minecraft,
Ooh.
right? So Minecraft is like this infinite possibility thing, and they're just basically they're getting synthetic data. So they've got something building on Minecraft and something looking at what's building on Minecraft, and there's all this synthetic data, and it can go on forever and much faster. And I actually think speed is part of the problem, but I'll get to that in a second. But anyway, so
We're an instant gratification culture at this point, so
but we're not nearly as fast as a computer.
no, absolutely not.
Right. And so when you look at epistemology, how do we know what we know? There's, especially when we're babies or whatever, there's a significant portion of our world that is static. The brain only responds to delta, right? It wants to know at the periphery of your eyesight or whatever.
Right.
It's interested in change, and everything else has become static state.
Correct.
And in gaming, we see this model happen all the time. If you're not in that section of the game,
Doesn't load it.
doesn't load it
Yeah.
and doesn't change it, and so it can save a lot of that. And this is true for artificial reality and augmented
brain does it
reality,
too.
and your brain does it too. And when you're really young and you don't have words for things, and you don't, so your delta is weird, right? Like you know that there's a change, and you're registering that,
But you can't express it.
You
right?
don't know how to
express-
articulate it. Yeah.
Yeah. And so AI now does, like, I was reading about this. There's a Stanford and Princeton put together a model from 14 million things from, I've forgotten the photo Flickr, I think, maybe, or anyway, it's a photo. I'm sorry, it's a photo web thing, and they used it, and what they discovered was that most of photographs on this are snapshots, and so if there's a picture of a fish, it's a guy holding a fish that he caught, right? Or it's a fish on a plate, or it's food porn or whatever,
Right.
And so their idea of fish is this weird skewed thing, but it apprehended the 14 million images in a fraction of what it would take you and I to apprehend it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is a problem. I think that our knowledge has multiple layers, right? We have a timing layer that it's like, by the way, side note, Brian Eno, if you get a chance to see that film,
Yeah.
see the documentary. I just saw it at the Crested Butte Film Festival. 500 hours plus and growing of things to pull from, a algorithm that's been patented, never the same twice.
Really?
Yeah,
A
I
quadrillion.
heard about this documentary, right? That it's using AI to generate images in the film
Oh.
as it's playing,
So
essentially.
you're never going to see it twice.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
And the same thing twice. Eno said no to documentaries about him for most of his life, and then these guys came up with this. I met one of the producers, and it was so interesting. I love, because Eno's touched Bowie and the Heads, and so many people that we care about. One of the segments that we saw in the film was a young U2, and he's talking to them, and he says, "Look, I don't know anything about music, right? I'm not a musician," he's basically a philosopher. And he sits down and he talks to these guys, and Bono comes in and he says, I wanted a more heroic sound to my vocal on, I don't remember the song, but it's one of the big hits, and Eno looks at him and he goes, well, maybe we should just slow it down, and he turns the dial. And the take you heard before was horrible. And he turns the dial and he slows it down, and it's literally the take that ends up on the album that becomes the huge hit. And you're like, oh my God, here's this artistic moment where he's having a conversation, and he goes, well, you want it more heroic, let's slow it down. And bam, there it is. And so if you get a chance to see it, don't just see it once, see it twice or more, because it's never going to be the
it's gonna be
same.
different every time.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure why. What were we talking about before? What was I talking about beforehand?
Well, we were talking about AI, but
Right.
I want to just make a comment too,
Yeah.
because I think you said something interesting too. Is like, when Eno turns down the knob, right? He might not have even known what that knob did.
Right,
Right?
he just picked one.
And I was reading this interview with James Dyson, that Dyson, the vacuum guy, right?
Yep.
Really?
Because he's a very famous inventor.
Okay.
Great thinker.
And great thinker. And someone asked him, who, you meet a lot of, you're a great inventor. You've met a lot of inventors. Who are the best inventors that you've ever met? And without missing a beat, he said, amateurs are the best inventors, because eventually if you invent something or you become an inventor or whatever, you then surround yourself with engineers and experts and all these things. And you start to then internalize this is what the system can do and it can't do. If you're an amateur that has no idea how anything works, you can almost kind of stumble your way into going, well, why doesn't it just do this? And it's like an army of engineers will tell you, well, because it's this, that, whatever.
Well, that's
But
what
then
you were
try
talking about
something.
earlier as far as the like.
The film.
Yeah.
Yeah. you just
I didn't
try
know what
something.
you couldn't
You
do.
don't know what you can't do. Exactly.
Exactly. And then sure enough, and then you just did it. And then the engineers go, oh, well, I guess I didn't know you
Nobody's
could do it
ever
that way
tried
either.
that.
No one's ever tried it that way.
Yeah.
And it's like, so that was his answer is the best inventors are people who are not constrained by they don't have the curse of knowledge of, well, this doesn't work, that doesn't
and
work.
to be perfectly honest, this is sort of the story of Hollywood, right? Like
Exactly.
the person who innovates comes up with this hit. Think about like, is it Peele who did Get Out?
Yeah.
Oh,
Think about like he does Get Out.
right.
Here's a guy who's had this idea forever, and he
Yeah.
does it, and it's people are like, wow, I never thought you could. I mean, that was a great movie.
I think he said
it
he had
is.
been working on that for like 7 years or something. But
Probably
that was the
percolating in his
script that
head
he-
for
yeah.
yeah, 7 years.
Forever, and so on point for topic, and still a horror film, and great casting, and right, big hit, $100 million plus, whatever. I mean,
Just
close
unveiled
to
a statue somewhere. I think I saw on the news.
It's a brass statue of Daniel Kaluuya, and he's like, the statue is
It's the-
vertical. He's like falling
really?
Yeah, it's the scene
into
where
the
he falls.
sunken place.
Oh, I didn't
Yeah.
know about that.
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
it's London.
It's a British thing.
Yeah.
It's not a statue for Jordan Peele. It's a statue
No.
for Daniel Kaluuya. And I also love that it's apparently right next to the Paddington statue.
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
So maybe not
Sure.
the same thing, but anyway.
Well, I mean, eventually they'll be in the same. I mean,
Became
you
a
saw
cultural
the
thing.
you saw the Winnie the Pooh horror film, right? Like,
Yeah.
I mean,
I don't
saw
know how I
the
feel about
trailer
that.
anyway.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
Yeah.
So, but the idea, that Hollywood is great at is, they'll love an innovation and then they'll dilute the fuck out of it until it doesn't make money anymore.
Correct.
And then they'll look for the next one, and that's the nature of the beast.
Hollywood's
is-
favorite thing is picking the one thing that was not the reason fans gravitated towards it,
Yeah.
Right.
and mining that till it's dead.
Right.
Like people love
Yeah.
gritty comic book movies. Everything's gonna be gritty in comic book movies from now on.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
you're like, that's not what we liked it.
Anybody see Joker 2?
Right?
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Yeah, and
I mean, but to be fair, I do want to make it clear. The reason I did not like Joker 2 is not because of I'm a huge Batman fan.
Yeah,
And
both are.
all of the characters are so far off the beaten path when it comes to like the Batman canon.
I mean, I'm pretty sure Todd Phillips was aiming for that.
Yeah, and so
Yeah.
my thing
Right.
is, I think he had an interesting story to tell. Had nothing to do with Batman or the Joker. Just make that movie and keep the comic book
Right.
characters out of it.
Well, I guess the thing that shocked most people, and the reason that I'm not particularly interested in going, is I'm not a fan of musicals.
Yeah.
I love
And
musicals.
I mean,
but it doesn't seem like an actual musical.
Yeah,
It's
that's-
like a
I'll-
movie with music videos inside of it.
I'll tell you, that was my issue. I love musicals too. He didn't do it. If you're going to do a musical, do a Broadway musical. He kind of did it halfway, where it's like,
Halfway.
and it's like, if you're going to do it, do it. If you're not going to do it, then
Yeah.
don't do kind of a half-ass
Yeah.
way through.
I'm a huge fan of Lady Gaga. I
also
picked
like
her
Lady
as a
Gaga.
huge, I picked her as a huge future star after
Yeah.
Poker Face. When I saw that video, I was like, she gets everything.
Yeah,
She gets it all.
yeah.
She's gonna be huge, and I have a witness.
I think she is.
And
I mean,
You
and
called
she
it
is,
back then. Good for
I
you.
called
right?
it after Poker Face, and she is huge. She's absolutely huge, and she's super talented. But does make me want to see her in that movie. That's just me.
I feel like I would rather watch A Star Is Born
Right,
versus Joker if I want to see her doing an amazing on-screen performance.
right,
Sure.
right. And I would love to see her in other things.
Right.
But the thing that was so amazing about Joker was that Todd Phillips did and Joaquin Phoenix did such an excellent job of describing a really marginal human being,
Sure.
a guy, and in a realistic way. Like, if you've got schizophrenia or whatever, that's a great portrait.
Yeah.
And that's a tough thing. Like, that's an Oscar-winning movie, no matter whether he's got the makeup on and you call him the Joker or not. That's an incredible thing.
If you were just doing a story about people with mental health
Issues.
issues being marginalized and ignored by society, that's a story you can tell.
Yeah,
It
and
didn't have to be wrapped in Gotham City and the Joker.
right.
Yeah.
And he did.
Yeah.
And then I think we were all curious. Like, I didn't know it was a courtroom movie. I didn't know it was a.
Yeah.
I didn't know it was a musical. I didn't. You know, so not hugely motivated to go see it. On the other hand, Eno. I don't know if I told you about this movie, but you should go. Brian. The Brian Eno documentary. You should see it. So yeah, interested in codifying being a generalist. I think that the age of the specialist is over. I think that the troubles that we're coming into now are going to be about, you know, one of my biggest beefs in the world is these social Darwinists who say only the strong survive. That is not what fucking Darwin said. All right, let's be clear.
Yeah.
What Darwin said
It's
is
also clearly not played out that way anyway. So.
well, it's not. It doesn't. I mean, it puts too much emphasis on the sort of the strength of the jungle or whatever, right? But what Darwin said is the adaptable survive.
Yeah.
That's what Darwin said. And there's a time when strength is going to be a problem for you, right? Like, I mean, look at the cancel culture mentality, right? If you're over strength, you're an oppressor and you're the bad guy.
Yeah.
Right. So, but the adaptable, if the adaptable survive, then it doesn't matter what environment you're in, you're going to adapt to it and you're going to survive. So I've always had a problem with social Darwinists because they're not fucking Darwinists, right? They're just like, you know, whatever.
They missed the point.
They missed the point. And I do think that specialization, you know, one of the things that we've come to terms with is your authority better than my authority? Right? Like, you've got an authority. You've got a specialist that you think is an authority. And I've got a specialist who disagrees with your specialist.
What do we do then?
What do we do then? And as a generalist, I want to be able to make my own evaluations.
Yeah.
Right? So I value anybody who gives me the data so that I can interpret. I want to hear your interpretation.
Yeah.
But I want to see your data.
Yeah.
So I can make my own interpretation.
Just the facts, ma'am.
Please.
Yeah.
Please. You can give me your opinion, but say, here are the facts,
Yeah.
and this is how I interpret it, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm terribly suspicious of any environment in which I have the analysis, but I don't get the data, right? Which seems to be
Correct.
a lot of what we go through nowadays.
Yeah.
And so in terms of codifying being a generalist or whatever,
Sure.
I'm interested in how things work. I want to know how they work. I'm happy to listen to an expert.
The big air
Quote
quotes there.
fingers.
Big air
Yeah.
quotes. I'm happy to listen to an expert, but I do believe that, especially in the modern era, everybody's got an agenda or an angle or a direction or
Everybody's
something.
trying to get something or somewhere. Yeah, sure.
I mean, I'm from New York City. Everybody's got an angle. That's the whole point. That's
Yeah,
where
yeah.
your leverage is.
I mean, you have to know incentive structures. Like,
Yep.
everything has an incentive structure in the world, whether or not we're aware of
Well
it
said.
or we're completely working towards it. But people have reasons to make statements, even if they're unconscious in their own minds.
Sure.
So you have to acknowledge that that is a thing. Someone will say something to achieve a goal. So whether or not it's true or false,
Yeah.
you have to be
Everybody
able to discern.
talks their book,
Correct.
as they say,
Yeah.
right?
It is a good way to put it. An incentive structure. I've never
Yeah.
heard of it
That's what
that
it
way.
is.
But yeah.
You
got a point
operate
there. Yeah,
based
yeah.
on what gets you your reward.
That's right.
the thing.
That's right. And
That's most people in life.
And they, you know, I'm a big fan of like the Matt Taibbis of the world who sit there and say, look, you don't have to believe in propaganda to be completely complicit.
Yeah.
All you have to do is fall into an incentive structure where they sit there and they go, if you don't do a story in this realm, we're not going to publish your story
Correct.
until you start moving over towards that direction.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. And so there are some people who are very consciously opportunistic and they're like, oh, I'm going to totally work the system and be the best of the best or whatever. But I guess my biggest concern is we're now at a point where in a significant portion of the world, systems are run by psychopaths. And we do not have, nobody has come up with the handbook of what to do when psychopaths run everything.
Yeah,
Right?
I
Like,
mean,
and so as a generalist or whatever, I'm like, I want to be able to go, that guy might be a psychopath.
Yeah.
That guy might have some really not good for the most people ideas going on.
that sounds amazing. I hate to push you off the
Yes.
story, but just to start to wrap everything up.
Sorry. How do you wrap it up?
We're starting to run out of time.
So
here on the
many
episode.
things.
Yeah, I
Oh.
know, right?
I love it.
Yeah.
But I wanted to ask,
Sure.
like, what advice would you give to someone who wants to pursue being a generalist in life?
So it's systems thinking. When I was at the phone company, I was lucky enough to be a part of something called US First, which was the guy who invented the Segway.
Wozniak?
No, the Segway was invented by Dean Kamen,
Ah,
who was out of New Hampshire.
okay.
He was in Nashua, New Hampshire. He was the guy, I believe, that invented the insulin pump.
Copy.
So he made an enormous amount of money on this thing that regulated insulin. And he basically had listened to, there was a professor at MIT who had a class called 201, which was applied mechanical engineering. And basically that class was, the idea was that there was a game that you played and you had to design a machine. And the first one I ever saw was there's a ramp, and at the top of the ramp is a hole, and you got to put a peg in the hole. And you have basically two strategic choices. Either you get up there faster and you get your peg in the hole, or you block the other guy from doing it. Those are the two sort of basic...
Those are your options, right?
The options. And his comment was, if we had better high school classes, this would be a easier thing to teach at MIT. And so Dean Kamen basically said, okay, let's go into high schools.
Yeah.
We'll match high schools with major industries because high schools don't have the money. We'll give them a 10-week program that they can do over spring break, and then they'll compete. And basically every choice that you make or don't make in terms of strategy and construction will show up in yours or somebody else's thing, and then it'll be about execution. And so I became, for 9X, we were one of the companies that was tapped to go into high schools, and we went into Greenwich High School, which is upper echelon, and I also went into one in upstate New York, which was a lower class, but shop class basically. And we would go in and we would teach them, and you'd have this 10-week program. And for me, it was great because I didn't realize that everything is a project, right? It's project management. And everything is, you have an idea, you have a goal, you have this thing that you're trying to execute, and you build it, and you make all these choices, and there's a beginning, there's a middle, there's an end. So there's brainstorming, and then there's prototyping, and then there's building it, and then you test it, and then you go up head to head with somebody else.
Yep.
And so I immediately understood that, as a generalist, I immediately understood that everything's a project.
Yeah.
Everything has a beginning, a middle, and an end. Everything has this goal that you're shooting for. And so whether you're doing a movie or you're building a robot or whatever it is that you're doing,
Construction, whatever it might be,
it's a project.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there and I'm like 35 years old. I'm not an unintelligent guy. I've done a lot of different jobs. And this is the first time that this has been revealed to me, that everything's a project.
Yeah.
And so everything is a project. That's as a generalist, everything is potentially a project. unless you're just out there doing research, which is sort of where I am with AI. But when I do research in AI, I sit there and I go, okay, if I was going to build my own AI, or if I was going to XYZ AI, then this is what I would do, and this is what I start. So I've done a lot of research, and I'm looking at the hardware versus the software. I'm looking at the goal. I'm looking at, all of the different things. But as a generalist, first of all, you have to do a bunch of different things. Mm-hmm. Because if you don't do a bunch of different things, one of the things that most people don't realize is you think whatever you're doing is unique.
Yeah.
And most of the time, the thing that you think makes it unique is not what makes it unique.
Right, yeah, it's actually very general.
It's very general. Mm. And the thing that makes it unique, you've completely missed, which unfortunately means you're being very inefficient.
Yeah.
Because as a generalist, I can come in and go, oh, that's the unique thing. Because I've seen all these that's the unique thing. That's what you need to spend your time with. Mm-hmm. But, as a generalist, everything's a project. Everything has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And you're just marshaling your time and your resources to address that. That's really all I can say about that.
Well, and speaking of ends, it looks like we're at the end of our drinks, but
Jay,
we'd love to have you back on the show. And the next time you're back in town, you've got something fun cooking. We'd love to kind of keep up with you. For anybody listening to the conversation, is there a way that people can keep in touch with you, or they could follow you? Or
you're so nice. I'm not that organized yet. When I was at Bombay Beach last year for the Biennale, we had my buddy Grant started a pirate radio station, and I did a couple of interviews on that, which is called Let's Meet. I haven't gotten onto Google Drive to edit those down and do that. But that is a direction. One of the reasons why I'm here, and thank you guys so much for having me.
Of course.
Is because I want to learn more about this form of communication and this process and everything else.
Yeah.
And I would love to reverse the process and have you guys as my guest, because I haven't asked you enough questions about. I just found out that you're married.
Yeah.
I mean, so
I love that. I think you're one of the first guests we have that your answer is, if you want to catch J Cobe, you got to find him in the wild.
Right.
That's right.
You know what I mean? You can't track him down.
Well, don't put me in a box.
No boxes.
So if you come down to Bombay,
if you put him in a box,
if you
there should be some martinis.
Meet him in person.
Please. Bombay Beach. So the Biennale is usually in late March every year. It's totally worth the trip. I know there's a bunch of LA people that live down there and work down there, and it becomes this strange international art scene for a long weekend. There's like a week or two beforehand where everybody's doing their thing, and then there's this 3 or 4 day moment where everybody shows what they've done. And that's when I did my interviews down there, but I can totally suggest that. But if you look for me down there, my name is Lighthouse, because I identify as a lighthouse.
Fair.
When I was a young man, my grandparents said I could be anything when I grew up, and I said I wanted to be a fire truck.
Hell yeah.
And they said, no, I don't think you understand what we're saying. And I said,
you can be a lighthouse. That works.
Fine.
Yeah. But I feel like I'm a lighthouse, which is, do not this way come. These are the rocks of despair. I've made this.
This is a safe place.
I've made these mistakes so you don't have to. But yeah, come on down to Bombay Beach in March, or you can find me. Hopefully someday, let's meet. Or some version of that will be available, and and I would love to be a guest again, and I would love to have you guys interview you guys on my show.
Well, yeah, we are absolutely down for that. We want to thank you for joining us today on Two Drink Maximum. It was, hopefully you finished your drinks, and hopefully you finished your drinks. Mine was easier to finish because it was not covered in dirty olives. But if you want to keep up with us, you can follow us on Instagram at TwoDrinkMaximum. That's TWODRINKMAXIMUM.
There he is. I think
getting much faster at that.
Perfect.
Wow.
Yeah.
You guys are great hosts. Thank you so much.
the radio ramble that you throw at the end of it.
Yeah.
But we want to give a big thank you to our sponsor, the Muse Rooms. Here.
Wonderful co-working space that if you need any co-working space or meeting space needs in the Hollywood Burbank area, they've got you covered. So check them out.
It is a wonderful place to be and
Super
visit
cool
and work.
with like hidden doors and
Speakeasies, all sorts of stuff.
right now, Halloween.
That's right. Halloween decorations going on.
Decorations.
But thank you so much
Fantastic.
for listening today. We hope everybody has a wonderful week ahead of them. And we will see you on the next one. Cheers.
Cheers.